Okay, thank you. Prananda Chryso, good afternoon. Welcome to the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Full Council meeting of Wednesday, the 6th of, that's the wrong date, we got given on this one. It's Wednesday, the 3rd of November, 2021. Please note this meeting has been recorded and may be broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the authority. And before we start the meeting proper, members will be aware of the sad passing of our colleague, Councillor Harold Barrett, and Councillor Lisa Mitten, Leader of the Council, would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, gosh, colleagues, where do I start? As you can imagine, an incredibly sad time for us all, especially myself and his family and his son, Wayne. Howard was a councillor, along with myself, elected in 2008 and represented the Vayner Community Ward. And blinking heck, what a fantastic job he did. What a great job he did, an amazing job he did as the mayor representing us as well, which he absolutely loved and adored. He really did fulfil his role as councillor and mayor, chair of planning and representing us on Brecon Beacons National Park. He did us proud. He did me proud. He's my best friend. I'm going to miss him immensely. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor, to just say a couple of words. And can I just thank you whilst I have that opportunity as well? It would be remiss of me. And before I forget, I was with the family last night and I did pass on all of your condolences and the very kind messages not only I have received, but Wayne and the family have received as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to hand back to you. Thank you,
Councillor Mitten. Just like to say a few words myself. Howard was my friend, colleague and my mentor. As mayor, he was a great ambassador for Merthyr Tydfil and he was always happy to give councillors advice based on his many years of experience. He will be missed not only in Vayner Ward, but by the whole of the borough and beyond. I'd like to ask all councillors and officers to join in a minute's silence to remember our friend. Members, can you please leave your cameras on, but make sure that all your microphones are muted. Thank you. Thank you very much, members. Thank you. So we now move on to the agenda. Agenda item number 1 is apologies for absence.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I have to leave at 7:30.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I don't think that we have any apologies, but unless they can answer to their names now, I think we still are missing Councillor Sherelle Jago and Councillor Chris Davis. I think Councillor Clive Tovey has joined us.
Yes, I can see Councillor Sherelle Jago.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I'm here as well.
I'm here as well, Clive Tovey. Yes.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so everybody's here in that case. Item number 2, declarations of interest.
Councillor David Hughes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, item number 6, Mr. Mayor. I have a prejudicial interest because I'm the manager of the engine house and it's mentioned in the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations of interest?
Mr. Mayor, can I come in as well?
Yes, Councillor Roberts, yeah.
It's Councillor Salmon, it is. I do
sorry,
apologise.
Councillor Salmon, apologies.
I'm on my phone. I haven't been able to log on properly on my laptop. I'd also like to declare an interest in agenda item number 6. I sit on the board of trustees for Dowless Boys and Girls Club, which is mentioned in the body of the report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? No others. In that case, we'll move on to item number 3, minutes of previous meetings. Someone like to propose those, please?
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to propose those. I just wanted to double check if we were going into the open session first for 3 and 4.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Yes, that's right. You're better at this than me, aren't you? I've jumped a page. Yes, item number 3 is a presentation on the Vision and Economic Recovery Plan. So, okay, who's taking the presentation for us?
Hi, good evening, councillors. My name's Liam Hopkins from the Urbanists. I've been working with the economic development team to put the vision together, so I'll be taking through the presentation, 15-minute presentation, and also joined by my colleague James Thomas from the Means. I'll share my screen, so if there's any issues, obviously please let me know in terms of not being able to see it. Yeah, so again, thank you for this opportunity to present the economic vision. I'm from a company called The Urbanists. We're based in Cardiff, operate across South East Wales, and I'm joined by my colleague James Thomas from the Means, who's a fellow consultant. We've been working together with the economic development team for the last 16 months to put together an economic vision to start to frame economic recovery over the next 15 years. We've got a few slides to give you a summary of the work, and then I understand Chris Long from the economic development team will run you through a report, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions. In terms of the work that we've been undertaking and putting together the economic vision, the fundamental purpose of why we were tasked with doing this by the council was to define and present an economic vision for the county borough for the next 15 years. They wanted the economic vision to be ambitious and long-term, to respond to current need, and that included the pre-COVID context, but also very much the outcomes of the COVID pandemic, but also to make it flexible enough to be able to respond to corporate priorities now, but also as they may change over that 15-year period. Another key purpose of this work was to communicate a series of core ambitions for the local economy, so to take an holistic approach to planning for economic growth, and that those core ambitions would help to collectively realise the economic vision. Also, it was to explain how the council is going to work collaboratively with partners within the business and the local community, the social community, to deliver on that economic vision. And then to provide a means of action to work on as part of a series of actions, essentially, that would help to frame and deliver the wider recovery, transformation and improvement plan. In terms of the method that we agreed, it's a 7-stage process that started back in the spring of 2020, so pre-COVID. First stage was around the framing of the scope of the commission and how we would best approach undertaking a large and important piece of work like this. Then we undertook an extensive policy and strategy review, which helped to frame obviously opportunities for the county borough. The third was very much around clarifying what is the starting position, and we spent a lot of time on this, and my colleague James Thomas will elaborate a little more, but that was essentially getting to grips with the impacts of COVID. And then we spent a fair degree of time in stage 4 doing stakeholder engagement, so trying to listen to what local businesses, partners in the community wanted to see, and also partners in government as well wanted to see in terms of priorities to be taken forward and addressed in this vision. We then prepared a draft vision as stage 5, and we undertook further community engagement then in the spring and summer of this year to test that with the stakeholders that we'd been speaking to. That process has then framed the final vision and recovery plan document, and that's obviously been presented to you previously. James, do you want to add anything further in terms of the process that we've undertaken, particularly around the impacts of, trying to get to grips with COVID? And
yeah. So I'll add a few points. As Liam said, in terms of the early discussions, in terms of the scope of works, then that was pre-pandemic. So as a result of the pandemic, then we undertook a reframing of the scope of works to understand the impact of COVID on the economy, and that was kind of very early stage. This led to some work around kind of trends analysis and comparison of national projections then, and what that could mean at the local level, and that helped us to kind of clarify or re-clarify the starting position, and importantly then feed into early council support that was being provided to businesses right at the start of the pandemic, and that work also helped us inform then our early phase of engagement. It also provided us an opportunity to kind of rethink how we'd go about the latter stages, so engagement itself then, and how we would actually speak with people given the kind of lockdown measures. So that kind of resulted in kind of a rethink and use of online methods of engaging.
Thanks, James. Another key outcome as well, before we move on more into the presentation, or key purpose, was to position the county borough within the context of the capital city region. Clearly, the county borough's got a critical position within the capital city region, and it's around getting it ready to take advantage of the opportunities that come from a regional plan for economic growth. And as you can see, Merthyr as a key function within the heads of the valleys, but also in terms of linking through to Mid Wales, so lots of tourism opportunities that we wanted to essentially capture as part of this piece of work and elevate Merthyr up onto that regional stage. In terms of why we are putting together the vision, it was for three main reasons. It was to address the economic need, for one. It was then to take advantage of regional and local economic opportunities, particularly those that are unfolding from a regional growth model, and taking an holistic approach to planning for economic growth. So not trying to look at economic growth in terms of stats and figures and diversifying the economy, but looking to plan in the whole, taking a more social approach to how economic growth can be delivered and have benefits across the community. In terms of what we responding to and putting together the vision, it's looking to address the current economic challenges. So that was those that were already present before the COVID pandemic, but then also addressing the context that was created by the pandemic itself, which are the significant impact on the UK economy as a whole, the regional economy and the local economy. So as James explained, we took a lot of time to kind of identify what the unfolding impacts of that were, so that we were aware of what the challenges were and how we could best respond to those moving forward. The second key element then was around actually responding to the needs and the feedback of local businesses and the local community and the key social groups and organisations that work within it. And then finally, was making sure that what we have done was positioned to respond to the requirements of legislation and policy. And I think it's the engagement aspect that was particularly critical, and is what we spent the most amount of time undertaking. So this chart just shows you in sequence how we engaged throughout the commission, starting off with support and health check surveys for businesses and community organisations back in the spring, April time of 2020 to identify the impact of what COVID was doing to the local community and businesses. But then we use a lot of that information to have targeted discussions with businesses as well, to identify early priorities that we were able to act on, and Chris and the economic development team were able to reference in terms of how they were moving forward with dealing with businesses. Following that then, in the autumn of last year, we started focused workshops initially with officers across the council, but then we also undertook an open community survey, so trying to get feedback on some of the initial baseline findings we'd been finding from the local economy, trying to unearth a bit more information in terms of what kind of impact COVID had had, and then also sharing our initial ideas with Economic Vision. That then framed at the beginning of this year a series of partner workshops. So partners included local businesses, social and community groups, public sector partners looking to deliver investment and change into the area also, and then again further discussions with council officers. Finally then, when we had a draft vision in place, we had a series of workshops in the summer, again with all the stakeholders we'd previously met, and at that point we were presenting the economic vision, discussing the key critical themes and actions that we've got included in the report, and taking more feedback and refining them. So it's been an iterative process over a 16-month period, but community engagement's been and stakeholder engagement's been consistent throughout that process. In respects of some of the feedback that we got from that process, this gives you a brief summary. So in terms of what was perceived to create a successful local economy, I'll start at the top, but strong community groups and social enterprises was identified as critical, and the need to support those groups over the coming years to help them continue to perform the critical role they do for the local community and economy, but also helping them to improve how they operate. The second was around public service delivery and taking an holistic approach to improvement across that, being more commercial, but also focusing on the health and well-being of residents as well. The third was around housing and addressing homelessness, addressing housing quality and creating housing choice. The third was around education and training. This came back very strongly in terms of the engagement that we had, trying to address and education levels, making sure that obviously young people were leaving with having had an exemplary education with good qualifications, good basic skills that made Merthyr an appealing place for the local for businesses to want to be in and for local businesses to grow. And then also looking at the existing adult community as well, and training opportunities for them and identifying that need within the local community. Digital connectivity and physical connections again also came back very strongly. So the need for better Wi-Fi connections, better physical hardware, software for businesses, and then in addition to that, looking at how we can actually improve physical connectivity, so better rail travel, bus travel, and active travel provisions as well, which was positive to see. Tourism was a key aspect, making Merthyr a place for tourism and culture and building on the momentum that was already in place with really strong local businesses that are really driving Merthyr's kind of tourism offer forward and looking to build on that as a strong sector of the local economy. And then it was around looking to attract growth industries into the local area, working with Welsh Government at a regional level and the capital city region to make sure that the county borough benefits from new companies that are coming into the region, and that creates opportunities for local apologies. Just close that down. Local businesses and people, and then looking to invest and supporting local businesses themselves. So making sure that we're looking after the small, medium enterprises that are already driving and underpinning the local economy. In terms of the economic vision, then, it's quite a simple one. It's ultimately to create an environment that supports growth of existing businesses and attracts new businesses to invest in Merthyr. And it's ultimately looking to equip local people with the skills and knowledge to have a job or start a business. Then it's focused on around community organisations and social enterprises and helping them to grow and thrive. And that means then also looking to attract more visitors to come into the county borough. So there's 4 simple key themes. And in terms of how that's going to be delivered, it's a series of action plans that will look to deliver that vision, but ultimately working collaboratively with businesses, community organisations to deliver on that success. In terms of looking to deliver the vision, there's a series of core ambitions, and these are the ones that are the 7 in total. The first is focused around economic diversity, so that's around how we can attract new businesses into the local economy that can strengthen and diversify it. Education and training is a critical one, so looking to obviously create an environment for young people to be able to flourish, but also an environment that allows adults to continuously learn and improve upon skills, and ultimately make Merthyr a really attractive place for people businesses to want to invest in. The third is addressing on the homes and creating good quality homes, addressing housing need by making sure they're done in a good sense of place, great spaces that reflect the character of Merthyr. Fourth is around transforming connectivity, so that covers off digital and physical. And then fifth is looking at public and community services, so that is an emphasis on how public services can be dealt with in a commercial way, but also focus on the health and well-being of the local community and local residents, but also then providing space for supporting social enterprises and community organisations to grow. And then Destination Merthyr Tydfil focuses on promoting the tourism sector, getting growth in the visitor economy as a key core of the local economy. And then the final one is around climate resilience and low carbon economy, and building that into all aspects of society, but particularly looking to ensure that Merthyr looks after its natural resources, but also taps into low carbon technologies as a means of economic opportunity also. So what we're trying to demonstrate is that there's an holistic approach to growth. We've tried to take a social approach to growth and a community-focused approach instead of just focusing on economic diversification, trying to get in specific businesses and being data-focused. It's an holistic community approach that's been taken. James, do you want to add anything further on each of these core ambitions?
I suppose in terms of how we got to that stage, Liam said about with the various workshops and discussions, and I suppose some of the key things from it is in terms of with the kind of wider community, so particularly the kind of partners, they welcome the opportunity to be involved, and we had very positive discussions then. So in terms of the aspirations and a need for a piece of work like this, that there's genuine interest and a willingness to contribute then to the development of the vision, but also as well then beyond that, what came across, that there was a genuine appetite amongst a range of partners to contribute towards the ongoing delivery then of that vision.
Thanks, James. Yes, and then in terms of delivery and looking at how the economic vision for the county borough can be delivered, each of the core ambitions has been set up to have a 3-year action plan, and within the document you'll see that for each of the core ambitions we've defined what success could look like, and then also started to frame a series of actions for how that can be, how those success factors can be delivered. Ultimately, there's a collaborative approach that's been taken to the delivery of the action plans. They will be led by the council to a certain degree, in the same way that the council's put together this vision. But as James said, there is an appetite from the engagement that we've done for the local community and partners within the community and businesses to be part of that moving forward. So while the Economic Recovery Board will review progress and make sure that the core ambitions are going in the right way and align with the corporate plan, and ensuring that the action plans are funneling forward and making progress for the recovery, transformation and improvement plan, there is an opportunity to shape and take stock of that, but collaboratively. So it'll be an iterative process led by the council, but with a lot of support and engagement from the business community and key social enterprises and community groups. James, do you want to add anything further?
I suppose you touched upon, isn't it, in terms of the action plans, and for each of the core ambitions, then that there's sections you'll see within the main report around what success would look like and actions to realise the vision. So that's been written in a way then for each of the 7 core ambitions, that there's kind of summary points about what that would look like then, and the intention is that will form a framework to develop up more detailed shorter term action plans.
Great. Just to finish off then, I'm conscious we've obviously got a set timescale to work to. From our perspective, this commission has been really interesting project to be involved with. We've really enjoyed working with the economic development team and officers across the council and members that we've met, the business community and also community organisations. I think it's a really exciting opportunity for Merthyr moving forward in terms of how this economic vision has been framed, but ultimately in terms of how it's now delivered, and that is the critical actions that will follow. But I think it creates an exciting opportunity for the county borough to pursue. So just wanted to say from myself and James that thank you obviously for the opportunity, and happy to take any questions following the report.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you, James. That was an interesting and informative presentation. So are you taking questions at this stage, or are we waiting to after the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, if I can jump in, you have a choice really. So you can either take questions now or wait for the formal report to come through from Councillor Thomas and do it as one swoop. So it's entirely up to you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah,
I think it'd probably be better if we had the report from Councillor Thomas, and then all the questions can follow on from that. So if that's okay with Liam and James, if you could wait for that, please. We'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Economic Vision 2021 to 2035. And Councillor Thomas, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I firstly thank James and Liam for all the hard work that they've put in over the last almost 2 years now, putting this vision together. I won't go through the report too much, Mr. Mayor, because we just had a great presentation. So if I just set out with the summary of the report in 1.1, in the summer of 2020, Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council appointed the urbanist who led the creation of the Merthyr Tydfil Town Centre Placemaking Plan 2020 to 2035, and the means to lead in the development of the economic vision. The purpose of this appointment is to develop a high-level vision for the county borough that the council's cabinet, chief executive and corporate management team can use to shape the future of Merthyr Tydfil County Borough. The commission was framed as a post-coronavirus recovery plan for the county borough to reflect the times that we were living through. The key outcome of the commission will be a council-owned document that all of the council leadership team, both members and officers, are galvanised to deliver. Whilst the document will be owned and authored by Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council, it will be shared and co-authored by the council's partners and the borough's citizens and communities. An economic vision has been prepared for 3 main reasons: to respond to the economic need, to align and coordinate the regional and local economic opportunities, and to take a holistic approach to planning Merthyr Tydfil's economic growth. The county borough's wide vision will be a top-level document from which all other plans, policies and strategies will be built, and it will ensure that any current and future developments are aligned to the vision for the county borough. Significant stakeholder engagement has been undertaken to inform the vision document, concluding with workshops in August 2021 to discuss the final draft. Engagement was held with private companies, community organisations, key partners and technical officers. The Economic Recovery Board will have responsibility for the monitoring of and implementation of the action plan developed. Any reports on progress and achievements will be fed directly into the board. The economic vision and the core ambitions will be delivered over a 15-year period. Over the time, the council will prepare and implement a series of action plans that will frame the work undertaken. The economic vision cannot be delivered by the council in isolation, but rather through partnership, working alongside businesses, community organisations and partners. What I'd like to say, Mr. Mayor and fellow members, you know, this is a vital part of our RTI plan. Everything will fit around this. You know, our education strategy, the RAR strategies, it all comes in here. We have to support the young, the old, the infirm, everybody in Merthyr Tydfil to make Merthyr a great place to live. So if I can go to the recommendations in 2.1, the content of the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Economic Vision be approved. I so move, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Is there a seconder for that, please?
Yes, I'd like to second that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mitten. We move on to questions then, and Councillor Clive Jones is first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some very interesting facts and figures in the presentation. I'm just asking one particular question. It's on page 23 of the papers I have, and it says on the top, note 3, what we are responding to. It's on the right-hand side as you look at it. It's the second dot down, and it says unemployment was estimated to be 5% of all workers in January 21. And it goes on to say it is predicted this will rise to 6.5% by the end of 2021, but there will be a decrease in 2022 as the economy recovers. I just wanted to ask, it seems as if that rise to the 6.5%, the projections are at the moment that it won't reach that level. Apparently there are 1.2 million jobs vacant out there. So could someone who's made the presentation confirm that that figure of 6.5%, it says by the end of 2021, is now not going to happen?
James Thomas, any thoughts around that data, James? Liam, please.
Yeah. I suppose in terms of where we were able to get hold of that data, as you say, that things have changed somewhat. So those figures are less now. But in terms of when we undertook that particular phase of work, we were looking at ONS, Office for National Statistics, and the Office for Budgetary Responsibility, as well as that there were others inputting at the time, such as the Bank of England with projections. So at that particular point in time, that's what the projections were. As you say, in terms of kind of updates, what's happened during the pandemic then, what would typically happen is that there's yearly updates, particularly with ONS, and you can take those and you find for the year. But what's happened during the pandemic, because of the huge upheaval, that's kind of altering on sometimes a monthly basis, and at the longest quarterly basis. So I think when you're referring to some of the changes, it's as a result of newer stats coming out, and what's appearing to happen now is that some of the impact is projected to be somewhat less severe then. But there's still uncertainty because you're hearing in the press to some of the arguments around kind of well, partly linked to Brexit, but other aspects as well. There's still some uncertainty, but it's projected to be less. But at that point of time of production, as I said, then we got those official stats from a range of sources. Yeah.
Just to add that when we obviously framed the stats, we were trying to capture the impact that the pandemic had on the UK economy, and it was obviously stark at one point. But we're working off the assumption that or by the time 2022 came around, there would be an improvement, and that is what we were basing the vision on. And we're in a position now where obviously that improvement, or it hasn't been as bad as what was potentially predicted, and the improvements actually happening sooner, which is good. But what we have got as part of the vision is, as part of the action delivery plan, is to obviously keep abreast of that unfolding impact and making sure that the vision and the core ambitions and the actions in there are responding to the right economic context. So that is a key part of obviously the plan moving forward, is keeping a sense checking those stats ultimately.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Chris Long wanted to add something to that as well.
Just to add to that, Councillor Jones, I think, and I think we've documented this really well in the plan, is that I think when that data was put into the report, we were kind of midpoint in terms of how support the businesses. So we didn't really know that we'd, displaced £40 million into the local economy through NNDR and through ERF1 to R3, the Economic Resilience Fund. And also, I think as well, at that point, there was the notion that furlough would end, which it has, and would have such a big impact. It hasn't, right? So the economy's kicked on quite a bit, actually. And I think now we're seeing that data slightly not as fierce as it was predicted. So I just wanted to mention those 2 points. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. And Alan Owen also wanted to contribute.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just building on what Chris said, that the strength of the recovery that we've seen over the last 3 months has been quite extensive. Obviously, this is a living document. Our huge concern, if we were having this report a year ago, was the impact on young people, especially 18 to 24-year-olds. And Councillor Jones, we had this conversation in several different fora about the disproportionate impact on that age group, which again is balancing itself out. The fact that this is a living document means that there are going to be other challenges over the next 6 months. I mean, the spiral in the inflation rate, which we see now, which will have other economic consequences, which won't be as dramatic, but will have an effect on the economy. So the fact it's a living document, then obviously we'll be cognizant of reaching the ambitions that we've set out, but perhaps in different ways going forward.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor David Jones is next, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. My query is for Caris, really. Perhaps I should have declared an interest earlier. Because I own a business in the county borough, do I need to declare an interest on this one, Caris?
Yes, you should have declared it earlier. If not, perhaps spoken to me about it earlier. No, you don't, because this you have an interest which is common to any number of councillors, so as not to undermine the public confidence in you dealing with this. And it's an economic vision which is so all-encompassing that I can't see that you would need to declare an interest.
Thank you very much for that. I do have, in that case, I do have a couple of other quick questions, I hope. How many businesses were contacted, and how were they contacted in the consultation or engagement, whichever? Please.
So, Liam, do you wanna pick this up in terms of what our thinking, what our strategy was for an engagement, and I can perhaps fill in some gaps then?
Certainly. So initially we reached out to, early in the pandemic, we reached out to some key hospitality tourism businesses, and we met with a handful in response. In terms of the number that were contacted, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, in that because they were contacted via the council's database, essentially, of existing businesses, which was led by employment liaison officers. So there was a high number that were contacted. I don't know exactly how many were contacted, but it was every company basically that was on the council's database. And then when we had further workshop discussions, we had targeted discussions with particularly key large employers, but also critical businesses that were identified by the economic development team as being kind of key partners for economic development and job growth and stakeholders in the community. Chris, is there anything you want to add further?
Yeah, I think our engagement was multi-layered. Councillor Jones, I think the use of surveys was a standard approach, but I think we recognised as well that periodically throughout the development of the strategy, we're in and out of lockdown. Businesses were trying to survive, right? So it wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't an easy task, right? It really, really wasn't. But however, I think we used a range of tools to reach out, right? Quite a lot of them was a kind of internal and partner intelligence, really, and relationships we've had with businesses. So as an example, we utilised the town centre partnership and the business improvement district in the town centre, and the officers closer to the businesses, just to talk to businesses to see what economic growth meant to them. I think through our sports development team, our community groups, we were able to speak locally to community groups in terms of what support they wanted, etc. I think we had from a business database perspective, we regard ourselves, or we do regard the fact that we got probably 15 anchor companies, right? So the bigger SMEs, so EE, Tenaco Walker, OP Chocolates, General Dynamics, they came to workshops, they came and spoke to us, right, which was really good. So in the summer we held Teams meetings with a lot of businesses just to try to find out. So it was broad in its appeal. It was very, very broad. And as Liam alluded to in his presentation, we spent a lot of time on this, right, trying to make sure we sort out business needs that shape the vision as well. I think we've got lists and lists upon businesses who we tried to reach out to. In many instances, I think on trying to talk to businesses, we always want to speak to businesses, the more the better. But I think what we recognised that some businesses were really hard to get hold of because they hadn't opened, right? They were still really, really struggling to come out of the pandemic. And I think the strategy recognised that as well, really.
Yeah, another reason to be asking that, Chris, is that I certainly wasn't contacted or I missed it. So I how many, and I live on my premises, so I'm just curious as to how many could have been contacted or weren't pubs like myself that weren't contacted.
I think Alan Owen wanted to come in on this as well.
Yeah, I think perhaps the best thing we do is to articulate how many businesses we have on the council database for economic development contact, and I can't remember what the figure is, Chris, but it runs into over 1,000.
Yeah, the database it varies between 2,500 to 2,750, right? And that's the database, and those businesses obviously being VAT registered or business rates, paying business rates to the council, and obviously there's lots of businesses that are unregistered for different reasons. So yeah, what I think we'll try to do, Councillor Jones, is backtrack in terms of the data sitting behind the report and actually how many we tried to reach out to, and give some sort of percentage really in terms of how many actually responded to individual surveys, individual responses per sector. I think we got quite a bit of that data sitting behind, and we could follow up really with that. Really sorry that we didn't reach to you, Councillor Jones, and perhaps we missed you. But be assured, right, as Alan alluded to earlier, it's kind of work in progress. So if you want to have a chat to us tomorrow morning, no problem at all. Happy to come up and have a chat to you about how we can support you.
Yeah, as much as anything, Chris, it's about future engagement. All right, the initial engagement we missed, happy days. But I certainly know that NDR lists were created for the initial NDR grants. So that's another way of, another list of people, if they're not already on your list. It's about future engagement for me, and thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Chris Davies is next then, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, generally really welcome this vision and direction of travel for economic recovery for the county borough, for businesses, organisations, our communities. It's been a tough time, and it is going to be a slow recovery. If you will indulge me, Mr. Mayor, I have quite a few questions, because I think it's about form and process for me with this report. It's kind of, for me, from spring 2020, with having quite a bit of engagement from a cabinet perspective, just gone and taken a world and a mind of its own. And we hear this evening, prior to this, just one workshop for members that was originally at 4 o'clock and then moved to 2:30. So, I don't think there's been significant engagement. But my first question relates to section 1.5 of the report, and is seeking clarity, really. The section reads, County Borough Wide Vision will be a top-level document from which all other plans, policies and strategies will be built, and it will ensure that any current and future developments aligned to the vision for the county borough. That's quite a strongly worded, quite a concrete thing to say. So what I'd like to get, and I'd like to direct these questions to the Chief Executive and Deputy Chief Executive, but I respect that the report author might be in a better place to answer this. But for me, this whole report is about accountability. I'd like to ask, does this section 1.5 suggest then that this replaces the current council adopted vision, and that vision which is publicly being consulted? I'm not clear about that, and maybe it's just the way it's worded.
So I'd come in there, Councillor Davis. So just for clarity, so obviously the piece of work in front of you is the economic vision. Obviously, members will be aware that currently there's a population needs assessment going on across the region, conducted whilst engaging with the PSB and the RPB. And Chris, obviously, you'll be aware of that work. That's due to conclude in December, I believe. And obviously, we need to look at that then from a local perspective. Any additional engagement would be undertaken as required. That then feeds into a corporate plan, and obviously the new legislation, that corporate plan review would need to include a review of our wellbeing objectives and our corporate vision. And obviously this economic vision work feeds into the corporate vision. So it could be a terminology of how that's worded there currently, but it's the context of the economic approach, that is. But from that perspective then, we need to take context of all our other strategies. Obviously, work of the RTI plan all feeds it. This all works together is probably the best way to describe it. And in terms of timing, obviously members will recall the development of the new corporate plan from a timing perspective. We'll start that in the new calendar year, but then we'll be looking to publish in summer to autumn of next year. And that obviously allows that, as we've had the discussion previously, new elected members following me would have the chance to actually input into that new corporate plan vision as well. So I hope that answers the question, Chris, from a clarity perspective.
Yeah, Mr. Mayelis, thank you for that. It does, because I got rather confused about, we started doing some work on a corporate vision and then it got halted by COVID, and council's been asked this evening been recommended to adopt a vision. I just wanted to be clear that is this now the new vision for the council in terms of as articulated in the report, the appendix and the presentation. So I welcome your clarity.
Al, do you want to expand further on that?
Yes, please. Unashamedly, it's an economic vision, Councillor Davis. So obviously, from an economic perspective, these are priorities. But if you look at other themes, whether it's education, whether it's social care, they'll have their top themes. So obviously, the corporate plan will actually look at what the priorities of the council are across those themes. So this is from an economic perspective, not from the corporate plan perspective of the council.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my second question then relates to section 1.6 of the report, and that talks about stakeholder engagement. And we've heard from James and Liam about some of that, and other members have asked questions. My question, because it's not clear in the report, because it just uses the word stakeholder, and that's a very broad term. Does that include the public and residents of the county borough, which are equal partners in the economic prosperity of the county borough? And also, does it include engagement with all elected, and I mean all elected members, included backbench members? You know, the cabinet member talked about economic recovery board members. He told me about scrutiny members, cabinet members, but, you know, we're talking about all, despite the workshop that was rearranged. Has this had full engagement with the public and all elected members?
Okay, can someone answer that for Councillor Davis, please?
Yeah. Do you want me to go first, Al, or you go in?
No, go on, you go first, Chris.
Okay, so again, it's the word what barometers put on significant, Chris, isn't it? Because I do think, I'd like to think we've kept certainly cabinet members, and I know we had some workshops in the summer, even though they were rescheduled. Attendance to that I thought was reasonable. It was pretty good attendance. From a public perspective, we did try to reach out with a survey for 2 weeks, tail end of the summer, where we had, we had responses back from the public. A lot of the responses were around clarity, around perhaps detailed actions that they wanted to see in the plan. Well, it's always difficult then to create the document with detailed actions in, which I hope you recognise. So in terms of stakeholders as well, I think the word stakeholders, partners can sometimes be overused, but I think we recognised who our stakeholders and partners truly are, right? And they were a mix of HEFE, the community. I think a lot of the RSLs responded, so did businesses. So I think our stakeholder map that we planned as part of a consultation and engagement at the start of the year, as I mentioned earlier, was challenged somewhat due to the pandemic and people responding. I think we took a brave decision during the summer to try to do, even though people were taking leave, we were quite flexible in our approach in terms of trying to speak to as many people as we could. So back to your question, it really depends on the word significant. I think over the last 15 years of my work, we've developed many strategies, Chris. And I think this one, I think we've done reasonably well in terms of our engagement, right? And I think that's the barometer I use. I think, as Liam alluded to in his presentation, we spent a lot of time trying to make sure we listened to people, and people definition is broad in its context, Councillor Davis.
Thank you for that, Chris. And Mr. Mayor, if I can ask a supplementary, I absolutely respect the challenges of doing this during the COVID pandemic. Can you provide me and any other interested members with a copy of some of that, particularly the public consultation? Because I know the stakeholder consultation with businesses is included in the means and urbanist report that's on the modern.gov. But if that 2-week period you talked about of pure resident public consultation, because as elected members, that's what we're here to serve. So I'd really welcome seeing that, please. Thank you.
No problem.
My third question, Mr. Mayor, is this, and Councillor Thomas referenced it in passing, as is the Deputy Chief Executive, but why does this report not make reference, the report that members are asked to be considered this evening in the narrative, why does it not make reference to the Council's adopted focus on the future or the RDI plan in the narrative? Because the economic recovery pillar is just one strand. The other two are improving educational standards and increasing resilience in social care. But this report does not make reference to those key strategic plans. It's almost as if it reads to me, this is a standalone vision and it's the vision and forget everything else. That's how I read it.
Yeah, if I can respond there. Apologies if that's the way it reads, Councillor Davis. I think what we tried to achieve collectively is an economic vision which actually incorporates the key elements which makes a holistic regeneration possible. Apologies if you read it that way, but it's the most holistic economic regeneration statement we've ever made, because previously it's only been about pure economic development. This actually integrates all the rest of the components.
Okay, no, I just thought I'd make the point. Mr. Mayor, then, can I and any other members be provided as well with the costs of this piece of work undertaken by the urbanists and the means? Because previously this council has come under significant criticism of its high and heavy use of consultants. So I think if members, without doing a requirement for an FOI request, if members can be provided, if it's appropriate, with the costs for this particular piece of economic vision work.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Davis. And if you'd come to me first, then obviously I could have provided that in advance.
No worries. Okay, Mr. Mayor, I've got two more questions and I'll be very quick. Section 1.7 of the report talks about the reporting back in regards to this great work, and I'm not criticising the work or the absolute need for it, so I hope officers don't feel that, but you know, it is our role as elected members to hold to account. The cabinet member read it verbatim, but it was about the Economic Recovery Board having responsibility for the monitoring and implementation of the plan, and any reports on the progress of this achievements will be fed directly to the board. Can I ask the Deputy Chief Executive if he feels that it would be appropriate that actually full council at some point is provided with an update on this work and the work of the Economic Recovery Board, not just the board itself?
Yes, Councillor Davis, I think the structure that we actually agreed was that this was overseen by the Economic Recovery Board to be fed back into Cabinet and into Council. And I'm not sure if anyone else from the Economic Recovery Board wants to make any comment on that. No,
obviously not, Alan. No, Mr. Mayor, I leave my questions there, and I'll perhaps say a few things in comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Amos, you had your hand raised, but it's gone down. Has your question already been asked?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. It was I was going to ask a question about consultation, and the points were covered by the answer to Councillor Jones's question.
Okay, thank you very much. So if there are no more questions, are there any comments then, please? Yes, Councillor Chris Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, absolutely support the aspiration and the drive associated with this, and I don't want any officers to go away and think that I'm knocking that. This is going to be a key piece of work post-COVID recovery. But for me, it's not the only priority for this council. And the way I have read the report and the way it's been pitched tonight, that this is the only show and the biggest show in town. And I absolutely take my hat off to the hard work and the commitment and the dedication. They're always at the front of the queue to come and present our regeneration team. And I absolutely, admire and subscribe to that. But, when we look at where we are, and the Chief Executive himself, when he came to interview, talked of, things, his priorities were going to be around, improving educational outcomes, tackling poverty, making sure that we were a sound financially organisation. And if I'm wrong, perhaps the Chief Executive will correct me. And then sort of mid-sideswipe, this report comes in front of Council this evening with no reference to focus on the future or the Council's recovery, transformation and improvement plan. And it just threw me a little bit. Challenges of this Council, one of the biggest shows in town, members, will be January next year. Estyn to come in. We're going to have a local government education inspection, so that needs to be a real challenge. The challenges of COVID recovery in respect to social care, that huge reliance currently. Councillor Barry will take us through a report later this evening on the accounts. Social services is looking good, but members, the hardship fund is propping that up. Tackling homelessness, another real big issue for us. So I support these aspirations, Mr. Mayor, but this has got to be done with us, not to us. And I really feel that there's not been the engagement to the extent it should be with elected members right across this council chamber or with the public, and I'll be proved wrong when I see the consultation results. Great piece of work, but let's ensure that we have a focus on where we need to be. Great economic recovery, but not to the detriment of actually young people leaving schools in this borough who can't read, write and add up. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Andrew Barry is next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A great piece of work. I've spoken to the guys on many occasions about it. For me, we're not passengers in this economy, we're drivers of this economy. I spent a very interesting morning with the CEO and the chair of the board of Merthyr Valley's Homes, who were extremely enthused about working with us to drive this economy. I mean, some figures, procurement in Merthyr, we spend as an organisation circa £70 million. The combined spend of the RSLs is around £30 million. That's without the health board and what they spend. I think the lever for this economy to become self-sustaining, driving local economy is with us already. I like the idea of engaging with the stakeholders and supporting community organisations and working collaboratively. I think we've got to go further. I think we have to push that. We have to work very closely in collaboration with them. And I think that the opportunities here, particularly when you consider the A465 over the next few years, to my mind, will be the new M4. When you look at the UK and the levelling up fund up north and the staycation agenda with people moving down into Pembrokeshire for their holidays and indeed around the beacons and Bike Park Wales, we have all the constituent elements to be an absolutely thriving economy. I agree with Chris Davis in a certain extent in terms of we can't leave the communities behind in this. And I think with social enterprise, we don't just support, we could be creating social economies with the amounts of money that we spend collectively with the major players in this economy. We really need to get to grips. Is it a good time to start a business? Start a business anytime is a good business idea. Is it a good time to have a vision? The vision is here. That's been presented to us. What we need now to do is to take that vision off the page and to actually deliver it. And we deliver it by all of those figures. Circa £100 million being spent in this economy, which we have a direct responsibility to oversee. We need to ensure that we drive this as one, as an authority, but we drive it with all the other main players in this economy as well. And if we do that, the solutions are there for us all to see. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Councillor Kevin O'Neill, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to pick up a few points that's been made tonight. First of all, Chris is right. I hate to say it, he's right in a couple of things there. I think there is a degree of confusion in relation to the plans. And again, my strap line is how we explain that to Mrs. Jones at the back of the number 9 bus. You know, it's got to be the simplistic explanation there. Also, another thing you've heard me banging on about is that people must have their say. He's right to say about it's not just cabinet, it should be our elected members. And also it should be our backbenchers. And more importantly, it should be our communities. Our people should have their say. They should feel part of it. So again, I'll come back to consultation again. How we sell this and how we explain this to our public is vitally important. Loads of ambition, loads of good ideas, but getting that sharp focus on how we drive it forward. And I'm constantly being asked by members of the public in the High Street, what's happening here? Where's that going? What's the plan for this? I think there's some work to be done to be bringing the public online as well, so they feel part of that change as well. But yeah, some good questions, interesting presentation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Before Councillor Geraint-Thomas closes the debate, would anybody else like to comment? No one else is indicating. So Councillor Geraint-Thomas again then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad to see that Councillor Davis is happy with all the work that's been presented tonight. I would like to see him if he's unhappy, put it that way. But no, thank you, Chris, for all those points. And I do agree with you, right? I think the poverty agenda in Merthyr is right at the top of the list. And to get people out of poverty, they've got to get into work, and they've got to have the right education and the right skill sets to get those jobs as well, those high-paid jobs. That's really going to pull people out of poverty. And I think, you know, I think this vision sets that out. I think it really does. We said earlier, there's 2,500 businesses in Merthyr Tydfil, and a lot of those businesses came out of the woodwork with the NDR grants that came forward during the COVID period. Businesses we didn't even know about in the local authority. So there is jobs there, and it shows that Merthyr Tydfil is an entrepreneurship town. You know, it's a town full of entrepreneurs who have really great ideas and really want to get on in life. I'd like to thank my fellow members of the Economic Recovery Board who've seen the iterations of this along the way, the regeneration team, and again, I'd like to thank Liam and James for the hard work over the last 2 years. So thank you all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. So I'll hand you over to Keris to conduct a vote then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask all those members who wish to abstain on this matter, can you please show now? Thank you. Can I ask all members who wish to vote against, can you please show now? Thank you. Can I ask all those voting in favour, please show now?
Morning, officer. My hand is not raising for some reason. Oh, there we go. Beg your pardon.
Yeah, I think sometimes it just takes a little while before you can see it. I'm not sure why. So far,
mine's not working either.
Just keep trying. There we are.
Mine's not working either, but I am in favour. It's Michelle.
Right.
Yeah, that means it's working now.
You're all showing. You may not be able to see it, but I can see that you are all showing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Okay, thank you. So if we could all lower our hands now then, please, so we can move on. Liam and James, thank you very much for attending and your presentation this evening. You're quite welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you want to, but if you'd rather leave, no one will blame you in the slightest.
Thanks again. Thanks all for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Right, so we're now back on track where I tried to get us to an hour ago, which is minutes of previous meetings, item number 5. So I understand that Lisa is
yes, I'm happy to move those. Yes, happy to move those, Mr. Mayor, 5 and 5A through to 5HI. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I think you just have to go to Judith Jones because there is a slight amendment. I think there was a typo in a previous report.
Yeah, that's right. I have got a note of that. So do we need it seconding first and then go to Judith? Or?
I think if you just go to Judith and she can explain it, then the leader can move and then we can just go through from there. We don't need questions or comments.
Right, okay. Judith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd just like to propose an amendment to agenda item 318, which was the capacity exercise phase 2. There was a typing error in the table at Appendix 1, which mixed up the grades for 2 of the roles. The Raspberry inspector was reported as a grade 7 when it should have been a grade 6, and the traffic assistant was reported as a grade 6 when it should have been a grade 7. There's no difference to the bottom line figure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With that amendment from Judith Jones, I'm happy to move those minutes.
Okay, second, please.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the accuracy of the minutes? No. Any comments on the minutes? No. Then it's back over to Keris then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask all those who wish to abstain, please show now. Thank you. All those wishing to vote against, please show now. Thank you. All those voting in favour, please show now.
It's not working.
And if everybody, there does seem to be a slight delay, but it is registering that you're voting. I can see that you're voting. I just think sometimes it's not showing up for you. So we'll just take our time. There we are. Yep.
On now, quick.
No, you were there, Councillor Rogers. I got you. It's
Yeah.
okay.
What it is, it's going on and it's going on quick.
Yes, that's it. But it is registering. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Okay, thank you.
Update your internet, Tony. Get on the BT speed.
Okay, can all lower our hands then, please?
Working now.
Okay, yours is still raised, Councillor Rogers. Councillor
I got it
Chaplin.
now. I
Yes,
do
it's
my
gone there.
best.
Councillor Chaplin, could you lower your hand?
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, my hand won't go down.
Right, okay. In which case, we'll move on
Oh,
to
no, yeah, done it.
agenda item number 6, Statement of Accounts 2020 to 2021, and that's Councillor Andrew Barry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so we have here a statement of accounts as at 31st of March 2021, in which we cover our revenue, capital, and overall financial position, encompassing our annual governance statement and our external auditor report for 2021. The logistics of the delivery of the accounts this year is in section 3. Thanks to the Governance and Audit Committee for their diligence when sitting to consider the accounts on the 18th of October. The International Financial Reporting Standards at section 4, determining the 5 constituent elements of what our accounts need to cover. Our 3 joint operations covered in section 5. Thanks to our external auditors over the past months, Wales Audit have had their own pressures, and we have Helen Goddard with us this evening from Wales Audit, who I'll hand over to shortly for some comments prior to the recommendations. We have the Wales Audit's report to the Governance and Audit Committee on the final accounts, again heard on the 18th of October. I can refer members to the table at 7.1 on page 78. You'll see a surplus at the bottom of the 4th column for 2021, £4.464 million surplus. An exceptional performance through what I think could be argued as one of the most difficult years this authority has ever had to face in its history. Storm Dennis, Brexit, COVID-19, an unbelievable year. None of us saw any of that coming. Our £4.464 million surplus is before transfers to reserves. Page 93 of your papers indicate these transfers. The ISB account, 779,000 for full-time nursery places from September 21 for Gyfartha Primary and Ysgol Santis Tidwell over a 4-year period. The RTI plan of 802,000, net full year cost to finance the plan. Social services, we put 770,000 for expected COVID pressures. We currently have 696,000 set aside for the pay award, currently enough to cover the 1.75% tabled by the employer side and recently rejected by the union side. Some way to go yet before a settlement there. We have community groups, £300,000 set aside to cover the transitional funding, legacy funding that ends on the 31st of March. We have put £200,000 into apprenticeships for 5 apprenticeships over 2 years. The general reserves, 634,000 into the general reserves, to increase our general reserves now to £5.334 million, being the upper end of our reserves policy at 4%. On our reserves, currently 5.3 million in the general reserves compared to 4.7 million this time last year, 4.3 million in our school balances and 15.3 million in our earmarked reserve, circa 25 million in our reserves. As an authority, we've spent 27.6 million on our capital projects against a planned expenditure of 31.3 million. This has been reported to both audit and to Cabinet. Our governance statement is included on your pages 190 to 240, which is a statement of the effectiveness of our significant corporate corporate systems, processes and controls that cover the whole range of activities that we cover. Heard the Governance and Audit Committee again on the 18th of October and recommended to full council tonight for approval. Our audit of accounts report by Wales Audit is at pages 241 to 258. And at that juncture, if I bring Helen in to make comment on the audit report, we'll move on from there. And Helen.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Good evening all. As those charged with governance, the Council is required to consider our audit of accounts report prior to the approval of the annual accounts. So the report, as Councillor Barry suggested, was reported and presented and discussed at the Governance and Audit Committee on the 18th of October. So I don't propose going through it page by page, but to summarise at a high level, the misstatements identified and disclosure amendments required resulting from our audit are corrected within the financial statements presented to you today and are also detailed within Appendix 3 of our report. We didn't identify any significant weaknesses in your internal systems and controls, which required reporting within our audit of accounts report this year. So the team will propose, following your approval today, to the Auditor General on Friday that he certifies the statement of accounts without qualification, with the inclusion of an emphasis of matter paragraph, drawing attention of the reader that there remains 19.4 million of property assets within the statements of accounts for which a material uncertainty clause was placed upon the assets last year by the Council's valuers and hence is still applicable for the current year for those the assets that are carried at that valuation last year. So I'd like to extend my thanks and my team's thanks to Stephen, Adele and their team for getting through the audit this year, during which has been challenging times for both of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for your team, your efforts. I know you've had your own challenges this year, so thanks for the efforts you put in. And at this stage, thanks to Steve and the team for the efforts that they've made in producing the accounts to such a high level. At that point, Mr. Mayor, with permission, I'll bring Steve in, our 151 officer.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. If I could just say that obviously from just in our revenue outturn, we've got nearly £4.5 million surplus outturn for last year, which is exceptional. And also, as well as the section 151, if we focus on our general reserves, and they've now increased to £5.334 million, which is 4% of our net revenue expenditure. And that goes a long way then in looking at the future and to making sure that we are actually sustainable in going forward. A couple of other points as well is that I would like to thank Adele and the accountancy team as well for all their hard work. It has been an exceptional couple of months or so. And also I'd like to thank Helen and the Audit Wales team as well. So thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Steve. Members, the healthiest set of accounts by this authority for decades is the reality where we sit today. However, we can't take our foot off the gas. We still have feasibility studies that we're carrying out. We're continuing our reviews. Focus on my performance is a driver for us, as is the performance dashboard being worked on and introduced to establish yet better performance. Feasibility studies, harnessing solar power, more developments, improved working practices from social services, who've had a superb year in their understanding of their demand profile and their budget responsibilities. They've taken leaps and bounds over the last 18 months. And at that point, I'll pay tribute to Chris Davis for the work that he did through Cabinet to bring them to that point, and the continued work by Councillor Tony Rogers. More reviews on working practices with neighbourhood services, carbon management board, asset estates management, fleet review, driven by Dave Hughes and by Judith. Organisational restructures afoot, which we'll hear more about later, and always an eye on the threats to the future. The looked after budget, mitigation, development of our own local and regional facilities, a recognition by Welsh Government of the out of control costs being charged by some organisations, the Welsh Government homeless policy, mitigation, lobbying of Welsh Government by all concerned to either extend the hardship fund or some form of mechanism with ring-fenced funding to cover the increased cost, not just for us, but to all authorities in Wales. We don't want a smoke and mirrors settlement. We want clarity and clearly defined support for that particular issue. And finally, thanks to all through the worst of times has performed so diligently and steadfastly to produce these quite astonishing set of figures in the face of adversity. To all the staff, supervisors and managers on the ground, to the chief officers, directors, to the CEO and his deputy, to both Councillor Kevin O'Neill and Lisa Mitten for their leadership, and to all members in this virtual chamber for the way you stepped up through 2020 and 2021 in the most difficult of times. A truly team Merthyr effort, which you all played your part for taking Merthyr County Borough Council to the strongest financial position for decades. I'll take you to the recommendations. 2.1, the audited statement of accounts for 2021, being the financial year ending 31st of March 2021, be approved. And 2.2, the annual governance statement 2021 be approved. I'm pleased to move the 2021 statement of accounts, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. As a seconder, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to second that, and in doing so, really just endorse everything that Councillor Andrew Barry has said, and also to give him a nod of recognition for all of his work, you know, within his portfolio, and certainly working alongside Steve and the team there as well. Positive outturn, positive general reserves. My thanks, of course, to Helen and the team as well, and as I've already said, to Steve, Adele and the team there as well. I won't add any more. Councillor Andrew Barry, you know, set all of that out, and as I said, I wish to echo and endorse what he said. So therefore, I continue and agree to second those recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Jeremy Davis has got his hand raised. Have you got a question, Councillor Davis?
No, not a question. I'd just like to say well done to everyone involved. What a turnaround.
Sorry, no, we can't. We need to stick with the rules of debate. So your comment needs to come at the end, Councillor Davis. We need to do questions first.
All right, Harris.
Okay, so are there any questions then, please? Councillor Julian Amos. No, your hand's gone down, Councillor Amos, again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to ask, during the pandemic, and it's a genuine question, did that save us money? Obviously the Storm Dennis didn't, but did that, in terms of the services we couldn't provide, did the COVID pandemic save us money? Obviously, probably the best person to answer that is Andrew or Steve.
I'll take it first. Councillor Amos. It's a difficult one to answer, really, in terms of our business did not carry on as normal, obviously. The hardship fund played a huge part in that. And without that support from Welsh Government, I think every authority would be in trouble. Not just us turned a surplus, but most of our counterparts, our counterpart authorities turned a surplus. But it's true to say, without that support, we'd have been in dire straits. We've had, Steve will give us the figures and how much we had from the hardship fund, but I think the problems haven't ended there, and some form of hardship is going to be needed into the future, not least with our homeless issue. If we don't get supported with that, we've included £1.88 million for the next 3 years. That's what we're expecting that to cost us. So you can see that not only through the pandemic, but into the future, we've got to have that support. It's a policy that is massively costly to us. Difficult, going back to the original question, to say that, you know, it wasn't business as usual, so we can't compare like with like. It was a highly unusual year, but that support from Welsh Government played a large part in that, being us coming through it, basically. Steve?
Yeah, it's only a couple of things really, is to basically state that, yes, I think last year there was a reduction in service demand over certain services. It's because of the pandemic. So that did actually result then in less expenditure and then underspends against various service heads. But we did have additional costs and loss of income as well across the board. And as Andrew has just said, really, that we did claim down from the hardship fund. And for 2021, the hardship fund figures that we claimed down was close to about £9 million. And that is the actual additional costs and the loss of income that just was incurred as well.
Thank you both.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? No, no one is indicating. So have any other comments then, please? Councillor David Chaplin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To answer the question that Julian said, and it's in the report, were there any savings? It mentions that there was, obviously the day centres were shut. There was a surplus of 155,000. In neighbourhood services, there were lower premises costs, ground maintenance costs, delay in some other things, reduced office utility costs, 645,000. On page 103 of the report, it says circa 170 employees were furloughed. People in performance saved 380,000. And transformation 67, corporate service 8, so saving of 450,000. Just adding that up, and that's a few of the things in the report, that's 1.2 million. So it's not a sniffed out amount. There was a lot of money saved. You know, yes, and plus we had a favourable settlement, which obviously we know we can't guarantee. So the concerns are, you know, a lot of our year-to-year stuff has been short-term strategy on balancing the budget. We need some long-term thinking here because things are not going to ease. I know we've got the RTI, but we've got to get our act together and look at this long-term because what the pressures are there. We all, Andrew said that there's things coming down the line. It's a good effort. I think, yes, the councillors, the officers all worked hard in an unprecedented time. And, you know, full hats off to what everyone worked. But to say that, you know, if you read the report, there were some very large savings because we weren't providing the services and didn't. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chaplin. Councillor Kevin O'Neill, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting to reflect. Must be 3 years ago that we had a meeting here where there was great concern about the general reserves coming down to 3.5%. At that time, councillors Geraint Thomas, David Hughes and Andrew Barry challenged, Steve and his team challenged the then Chief Executive about the medium-term financial plan that said today we'd be £23 million overspend. They thought that can't be right. There was some change of leadership, there was some change of approach, and they started looking from a basis of our ambition being fueled by our budget, not being ambitious for things we couldn't afford. Cost cutting, yes, it happened, but investment also happened, development also happened, and yes, we had the floods, we had the storms, we had COVID-19 and all those other things, and a year of £1 million we might not have had otherwise, but it's not £23 million, that's for sure. So, I mean, what I want to do is recognise again the work that was done together with the new Chief Executive, with Steve and his team, and with Cabinet, and particularly Andrew. I've got to say about Andrew, I thought that delivery tonight was absolutely superb, first class. And what he's achieved is that what has happened is that budget has become an enabler, not a weight, not a disabler. The budget management has achieved us to do what we do. I mean, who would forget all the money that we got for our businesses? Working together with our revenues and budgets team, with Andrew, making sure that we were the best in Wales for getting money to our businesses at the most difficult time they ever faced. So £23 million comes down to £4.5 million. £23 million projected deficit comes down to £4.5 million surplus. Job well done, I say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Geraint Thomas, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, there's been a lot of hard work by everybody on this, you know, our monthly budget boards, where we scrutinise the financial picture of the local authority. And if someone's overspending, we ask some really pertinent questions. And I've got to say, you know, Steve Jones, he's like the Virgil van Dijk of the council. He is. He's super safe, you know, nothing gets past him at all, you know. And Councillor Andrew Barrett is like Alison Becker. And like Liverpool bought 2 players that have changed their fortunes, and we're lucky to have those 2 as well, looking after our finance. And no, so I just like this. What I'm really impressed with, although we've made a surplus, we've invested our money back into local authority where we were weak. There's more jobs in the local authority now, and I think we are stronger going forward. So yeah, thank you very much for that presentation tonight, everyone. It was really, really good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's welcoming the fact that the monies have been put back into reserves, and the fact that we've got a 4.5 million surplus. But as the chair of the Governance and Audit Committee, I don't think we can shy away from the fact that the settlement for the year 2021 of 4.85% was the best that we'd had in the previous 13 years. And then you throw into the mix the unusual year we've had with the pandemic and some of the explanations for the savings of monies that Councillor Chaplin has indicated has to be taken into account. Yes, there were less demand on services because of the fact that the authority virtually had to shut down compared to what we normally do from day to day, plus the furloughing of staff, which is obviously saving there, and staff having to, hundreds of them, work on home. So you've got the consequent savings there. We cannot take our eye off the ball on particular issues. And we have discussed this, Mr. Mayor, in previous councils. One is the budget for homelessness, which I think we need to keep a very careful eye on. And the usual one, and that's the looked after children's budget, which has been a cause of anxiety for all administrations. So we need to be careful with that as well. And yes, as the chair of the Governance Audit Committee, I want to thank everybody involved, particularly staff who have worked in unusual circumstances, and the Wales audit staff as well. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Julian Amos, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, Councillor Clive Jones there has taken a lot of what I was going to say. I think it's important, really, that first of all, I should congratulate Steve Jones on, as always, on producing an excellent statement of accounts and a lot of hard work he's putting on it. But I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that a few years ago we were in a dire situation, dipping into our reserves, and really what happened to transform this was an exceptionally good settlement. And yes, we are in a best situation we have been for many years. But I think it's worth remembering that the last independent administration I was in spent its time struggling with a deficit situation. And also, so did the last Labour administration. Whereas this administration, very fortunately, and I congratulate Andrew on managing the budget. But after that positive settlement from Welsh Government, that was when we turned things around. And also then, of course, that was assisted by the savings we made. So yes, you know, these are a good statement of accounts, but I think they should be viewed in the context of the favourable situation we found ourselves in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Amos. Are there any other comments? No one is
Yeah, I'm allowed to
indicating.
speak now, Mark, because I don't know when I'm allowed to speak lately. But no, I'd like to say well done to the team and that. Do you know what I mean? It's been brilliant how they managed to save all this money. And I thank them for all their hard work.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Davis. So I'll hand you over now to Caris to conduct the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask then all those who wish to abstain on this item, please show now. Thank you. Can I ask all those who wish to vote against this item, please show now. Thank you. And all those who wish to vote in favour, please show now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Okay, thank you. So if we could all lower our hands then, please. Okay. Councillor Galsworthy, could you lower your hand? Thank you. Thank you very much. So we move on to agenda item number 7, Letter of Representation 2020 to 2021. That's Andrew Barry again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As always, the letter covers the authority's representations to our external auditor, Wales Audit, in relation to our assurance to Wales Audit Office that our Chief Finance Officer has fulfilled all obligations in preparing our financial statements and has given a true and fair view of our financial position within the authority. Audit Committee received the report 21st of June, covering our responsibilities, the information provided for our external auditor, financial statements, the transactions, assets and liabilities, signed by the Mayor and Chief Finance Officer, so yourself, Mr. Mayor, and Steve as our Finance Officer. Very simply, one recommendation, Mr. Mayor, 2.1, representations regarding the 2021 financial statements be approved and communicated to the appointed auditor. I move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Seconder, please.
Yes, I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? No, there are no questions. Are there any comments? No, there's no comments. So I'll hand you back over to Caris again then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask all those who seek to abstain on this item, please show now. Thank you. All those voting against, please show now. Thank you. All those voting in favour, please show now. That's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. So if we all lower our hands then, please. So I'd like to thank Helen Goddard and the team from Wales Audit for attending this evening. You're quite welcome to stay and view the rest of the meeting, but if you'd like to leave at this point, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
So we'll move on to agenda item number 8 then. Local Government and Election Wales Act 2021, proposed updated governance and audit committee terms of reference, composition and lay member recruitment process. And once again, it's the Andrew Barry Show.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't read the title again, just suffice to say it's the Local Government Elections Act. There are a number of changes to the audit committee because of the act and that need to be reflected within our constitution. Comes into effect May 22, section 4. We cover the current situation and the legislative changes in some depth. That include 1/3 of the committee must be made up of lay members. The Governance and Audit Committee will be chaired by a layperson. The Vice Chair can be a councillor, but not a member of the Cabinet, because no scrutiny process is designed to scrutinise executive decisions. The recruitment of lay members within the new makeup of the Governance and Audit Committee will be overseen and approved by the Council to assure independence to the Council, with no business or political affiliations affecting the performance, detailed in the 2011 measure. As members, we all have a responsibility to make the public aware of these new measures and opportunities. Criteria of suitable applicants can be seen at 5.9. It means amendments to the Constitution and SIPFA regulations, the finance regulations that guide us, and at Appendix 1 we have the updated terms of reference. Just remains the recommendations, Mr. Mayor, 2.1 to 2.5, 2.1. The legislative changes to the Governance and Audit Committee introduced by the 2021 Act and the 2011 measure be noted. 2.2, the updated terms of reference for the Governance and Audit Committee, as outlined at paragraph 5.3 of the report, to take effect following the annual meeting of the Council on the 25th of May 2022, be approved. 2.3, the changes to the membership of the Governance and Audit Committee, as outlined at paragraph 5.3 of the report, to take effect again following the annual meeting of the Council on the 25th of May 2022, be approved. 2.4, the delegation of process for selecting, recommending appropriate lay members to an officer panel comprising of the monitoring officer, chief finance officer, and the head of internal audit, be approved. And finally, 2.5, the presentation of a further report advising of those appointments made under recommendation 2.4 to full council at the conclusion of the appointment process, be approved. And I move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. A seconder, please.
Yes, I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And questions? And Councillor Clive Jones is indicating.
Yes, thank you, Chair. 2 questions. Could I clarify the actual term for each of the 3 lay members? I know that the current member we've got is on a 5-year term. Does this apply in future to all the other lay members that will be appointed to this?
Caris, will you have an answer?
The straight answer to that is no, I don't know. So Councillor Clive Jones, I'm going to have to come back to you with that because I don't off the top of my head know what the term of office is.
No, I've read the report very carefully, more than once in the appendix, and there's no mention of a term except the reference to the current member. And my other point is under 4.4 on page 269, the second dot down, it says the Governance and Audit Committee shall be chaired by a lay member elected by the committee. Now, my understanding is that in the Act it states that it must be chaired by one of the 3 lay members.
Yeah, I think the explanation for that is that it is something that comes into effect in April of next year.
May next year.
May next year, and therefore it shall because it's in the future, not because it's a less of an imperative. It's simply that it's because it's a future action.
Yeah, as I understand it, it cannot be chaired by a councillor.
That's correct, Councillor Jones.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Are there any other questions? No one is indicating. Are there any comments?
Chair, I've left my hand up purposely to make a comment.
Yes, that's fine. If you'd like to make your comment then, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. What I'm going to say now I feel very strongly about, and it's not just because I happen to be in my second stint as the chair of the Governance and Audit Committee. And I know that the Act is quite specific, but I believe that the Welsh Parliament have made an error of judgment in frankly stipulating that the chair of the Governance Audit Committee must be a lay member. I welcome the fact that we've got a lay member on the current Audit Committee and have for some time, and that the number of lay members are going to be increased. But to then actually state that a councillor cannot be the chair of the committee, I think is a retrograde step. I understand that I'm not alone in that view from members of other authorities. I don't understand really what is the real thinking behind that, because if you look at page 270 under 5.5 A and B, it states lay members should be independent from the council and have no business connection, although knowledge of how local government functions would be a definite advantage. And B, in appointed lay members whose political allegiances are well known, local authorities should consider if this compromises the independence from the council of a lay member should possess. So I really think that my view is that this is going to cause issues and problems. I'd be interested to see how this pans out, but frankly, I do think there's going to be difficulties in the future by the very fact that they've stipulated that in our case, none of the 6 members on the Audit and Governance Committee will be eligible to put their names forward for the chair. And I understand that the first meeting after the 25th of May next year of the new committee, they will have to elect one of the 3 lay members to be the chair. And we already know from the committee that the current lay member, who is a very good member, Bob Williams, will not be putting his name forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Darren Roberts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got to support Councillor Jones on this. I've got my reservations about this. We all know how important scrutiny and audit is, for that matter, in holding officers and cabinet to account. And it's, you know, it's something that we've been picked up by the Improvement Board and Welsh Government. Now, we all know, we all either sit on a scrutiny committee or an audit committee, or attend if you're a member of the cabinet, how difficult it is to attract the right calibre of co-opted member and or lay member to these positions, and to try to get somebody with the relevant skill sets, I think, is going to be a big ask. I hope I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor, but I think we're going to be revisiting this in the not too distant future, because I don't think this is going to work, quite honestly. Also, if you've chaired a scrutiny committee or an audit committee or chair of planning or whatever it may be, you know the level of work that goes into that position of being a chair, the engagement with officers, cabinet members, third parties, you know, third sector, whichever it may be. There's a lot of work which got to be undertaken, and I just think that for a lay member to be asked to do that level of commitment is a step too far. I hope I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor, but I think we're going to, like Councillor Jones says, rule this decision. But we are where we are. This is being not forced on us, but we've got to accept the changes, and we'll see where it goes. But I have got my reservations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Julian Amos, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't take long because I'm just echoing the comments of Councillor Jones and Councillor Roberts. What's worrying for me is the fact that how we get the expertise into these people who take the job on. Councillor Clive Jones's attention for detail is legendary, and he has done an excellent job as chair of the committee, sparing his blushes, but he has got the expertise of local government. He understands what is important, and to replace him, we're going to have someone in who we don't really know what their skill set is, how well they know local government. If nobody applies who has that skill set, we'll have to accept someone who doesn't. So we're not going to have such a good chair as we've got now. There's also the fact of, which was touched on, about political allegiance. At the moment, because it's a councillor, we all know what Councillor Clive Jones's political allegiance is. If it's, heaven forbid, a Tory got in here, we'd know what his was. And if an independent member, we'd all know where they stood. Somebody comes in here and we haven't a clue where they come from. And the other point I made, and perhaps I should have asked it as a question really, it's unclear really how this affects the number of SRAs that are allocated to the council, because will this new lay member be awarded the same SRA as the current chair is? That's not clear really. I don't know if it's clear in the legislation. But yeah, I agree. We're totally with Councillor Jones and Councillor Roberts. This is something that's going to return to haunt us, and I suspect this will be reversed in a few years' time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Amos. If there are no other comments, I'd just like to say that I echo the concerns that members have raised. It will be interesting to see how this pans out in a few years' time. I hope it works well, but we'll wait and see. But Councillor Andrew Barry now wishes to make a comment.
No.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Barry. Before you go, Councillor Jeremy Davis, because you'll close the debate, Councillor Barry.
Yeah, just like echo concerns. If you're going to have people in chairs, you've got to have people that are going to have knowledge of what they're doing. And if we don't, it's going down a dangerous road where, like the council said, it can come back and haunt us within a few years.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Davis. Anybody else before Councillor Barry wishes to close the debate? No, Councillor Barry, if you could close the debate then, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we would all share the concerns of this. For me, the two areas are our ability to recruit. We don't have the ability to recruit lay members at the rate we need to, particularly one who's going to need, I mean, Clive will know the level of knowledge and time and effort you have to put into this role. It is huge and it is a vital role. The statement of accounts mentioned the vast amount of work that audit and governance have done over the last year. That would be daunting to a member to do, but to a lay member to come in, very, very difficult to recruit. And I do see problems in the future. The other element for me is it somewhat undermines what councillors are all about. Why would you need to go to a lay member when you have councillors who put themselves forward for that very role, in effect? I share your concerns. I think this is a watching brief. I believe we will be talking about this again into the future, because it's fraught with difficulty. However well intended, it's fraught with difficulty, and I think we will be coming back to it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. So, Caris, would you like to conduct a vote then, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can I ask all those who wish to abstain on this item, please show now. Thank you. Can I ask all of those, oh, sorry, can I ask you to put your hand down, please? Thank you, that has been recorded. Those who wish to vote against, please show now. Thank you. Thank you. And can I ask all those voting in favour, please show now.
Morning, Rob. I think I pressed the wrong button the wrong time.
Ah, I'm afraid, Councillor Smith, we have to take the vote that you
Okay,
have
no
recorded.
problem. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. If we could all lower our hands then, please. Right.
Mr. Mayor, I have to apologise. I must leave the meeting now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Galsworthy. Before we move on to the next item, I know we're coming up onto the 2-hour mark, which was the time limit on the meetings. However, I do propose that we carry on through the agenda and finish the meeting this evening. So in which case we'll move on to agenda item number 9, which is the volunteer policy. And Andrew Barry again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick report, volunteer policy, simply report to seek approval from Council tonight to implement the policy. 3.2 points out that the volunteer is not an employee of the Council, hence there is no binding contract between the Council and any volunteer. 3.5 points out that trade unions have been fully consulted with no concerns raised. However, adjustments to the working support practices will be implemented. The policy is included at pages 282 to 289 of your papers, and at Appendix 1 we have a sample of the support and supervisory record. The recommendations are 2.1 and 2.2. 2.1, the volunteer policy be implemented with immediate effect, be approved. And I almost hesitate to say this one, but delegated authority be given to the head of human resources for any minor future amendments to the policy and procedure in the consultation with a portfolio member be approved. I move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. A seconder, please.
Yes, I second that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Declan Salmon is first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is for Andrew. Listen, this is just for clarity and to avoid confusion down the line for residents and for community groups. Can you just clarify, because members will be asked, that this policy has nothing to do with volunteers within community groups throughout the borough and is only applicable to volunteers directly recruited, for want of a better word, by the council?
Fran, do you want to give chapter and verse on that?
So yes, that is correct. However, we have work revamped in relation to the policy itself to ensure that it is fit for purpose and falls in line with similar policies that voluntary groups within the borough have adopted.
Okay, does that clarify the point for you, Councillor Salmon?
Yeah, thank you, Fran. But it doesn't affect at the moment community groups or volunteers within the borough.
It doesn't affect community groups or volunteer groups within the borough at all. This is purely
Lovely.
for volunteers within the local authority.
Yeah, it was just clarity because we will get asked. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salmon. Councillor Chris Davis, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fran, you've answered my first question, which was going to be, has there been consultation in respect of the Volunteer Centre Voluntary Action Merthyr? So that's my first one done, and I can see Beb's not here, so hopefully you can take the questions. My second question is, how often, and I really welcome the template for the support and supervision of volunteers. I couldn't see in the report, unless I missed it, how often will volunteers be supervised and supported, and there'll be the formal session around that, Fran?
And this is where we haven't been prescriptive in the policy because it will very much depend on how long the volunteer is with us for. So there will obviously be the day-to-day supervision with the volunteer if they're in for a long period of time. But if it's for just short-term volunteering, then that formal supervision might not be required.
That makes sense, and I accept that. Okay, so my third and final question, Fran, will you and the report author consider removing the reference to vetting? Because I think that's a given, and it's a bit of a put off for volunteers. It's an assumed thing that anybody that you take on, you vet, and just call it an application form for volunteering? And also, can you add into the report, consider adding, there's a section that's missing about people's disability and support needs. Will you consider looking at those amendments to the final version of the application for volunteering?
Oh, I don't know. We'd have to go back out to consultation with the trade unions because the policy has been consulted with to date. So it's whether we include that in the next version of the policy and the updates.
I think I need to come in there just to be clear that if you change the policy, then you can't approve it tonight. Because you have a policy. But you have a policy which is brought before you in the form that it is, and as Fran has just indicated, that has been the product of consultation on various levels. So you can't just change it tonight. It would have to be withdrawn.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, can I ask the head of human resources then, that application form that's in the policy, does that comply with the council's commitment to being disability confident? Because I would suggest perhaps it doesn't.
As far as I was aware, yes, it does, but I can go back and consider that again. And if there's any amendments needed to that, we can go back out and consult with them and then bring another report to council at a later date.
I didn't intend to create problems for this report or you this evening, because I understand the recommendations is that delegation to whether they deem as minor changes will be delegated if council approve this report this evening, and I don't want to prolong this because I really welcome it.
But if it's deemed that the policy isn't disability confident and doesn't meet those requirements, and that would be a substantive change to the policy there, which would need to come back before council for approval. That wouldn't be considered a minor change.
Is Councillor Barry minded then to bring this back at a further point?
Mr. Mayor, before Councillor Barry does consider that, may I point out something that Fran can then clarify or not? Happy to go to Andrew first.
Thank you, Leader. I'm happy that Fran believes that the policy is disability confident. However, at a later date, Chris, we can take advice and come back to the policy and look to review it if at a later date it's found that it isn't. But I'm happy that Fran is confident enough to say that it is.
Yeah, I'm content with that. Obviously, with your role as Council's Disability Champion, Councillor Barry, on your head be it then.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. Did you have any further questions?
No, Mr. Mayor, that's fine.
Okay, Councillor Julian Amos then, please.
Yeah, it's just a question for, well, I don't know, it's Fran or Caris, really. The people we recruit, are they covered under our insurance policy for if they're injured undertaking duties on our behalf, and if they cause an injury or cause an accident or whatever, when they are actually doing duties for us, will we have a vicarious liability for those events?
So there's actually a section within the policy that covers insurance for volunteers. And we've also had it confirmed by insurance that yes, they would be covered without insurance while they're on our premises.
But what about a vicarious liability for their actions?
It will very much depend on what they've done as to whether we're vicariously liable for their actions, because it's not a contract of employment between us and the volunteer.
Well, that's the essence of my question. But they might not be an employee, but they are. They might find it in law they're an agent of us, and we be careful. I'm fully supportive of the policy, and I vote for it. But it's a question really that the extent of any vicarious liability we might have. I don't think you can vicarious liability works on the basis of it depends on what they do. It's the link between us and them.
I think the issue is more, Councillor Amos, that it depends on what they do that incurs damage or cost. Because if they are acting within what it is that we've asked them to do, and whatever goes wrong is within the course of that, of them following what they've been asked to do, then that may incur some liability for us. If they do something which acts outside of what we've asked them to do, then that I would anticipate would mean that we would not be liable, because we'd be able to argue that they haven't complied with what we've asked them to do.
Okay, that's a fair answer. Yeah. Thank you, Caris. As usual, that's an excellent answer.
Thank you, Councillor Amos. Councillor Midden, you've got your hand raised. Was that just to make the clarification point earlier?
Well, I was going to actually, both in response, I guess, to Julian's question and Chris's question, because within the body of the policy, I think that it does set that out. And then, you know, as Councillor Barry said, we could further explore that. But, you know, it's set out on page 6 with regards to health and safety provision, and page 9 with regards to being a disability confident employer. And then, you know, ensuring that, you know, they are, whilst not employees, they are still protected and not susceptible to discrimination. So apologies that it's not a question. I was just hoping to be helpful in regards to the actual policy and supporting what Chris was looking for, really, and then subsequently Julian. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor David Isaac, did you have a question?
Yeah, yes, please, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering who's going to be responsible for scrutinising the volunteers and making sure we don't use a volunteer when we should be using a paid member of staff. Thank you.
So that will ultimately sit with HR then, and that was the main reasons for implementing this policy in the first place, because there wasn't overall oversight from a local authority perspective of where volunteers were being used throughout the authority and what their roles were within the authority as well.
Okay, does that answer your question, Councillor Chaplin? Councillor Isaac?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Julian, your hand is still raised. Did you have another question?
Yeah, it's a quick one. I'm being lazy. It might be actually in the report, but will we be asking for CRB checks, criminal record checks, or?
Councillor Amos, you are being very lazy now, because that is included in the report. So
I take that as a rap on the knuckles.
The council.
I take that as a rap on the knuckles then.
Absolutely, it is.
I will see you later.
In the Brose car park.
Okay, any further questions? No, could you just take your hand down, Councillor Amos? Thank you. Are there any comments, please? Councillor Chris Davis.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, absolutely really welcome this. I would suggest perhaps slightly overdue, but we've been dealing with lots and lots and lots, particularly over the last 18 months. But, you know, this, I think, will absolutely complement our work experience policy, which hasn't been that long ago supported by council, and they are two absolutely amazing tools to support our community to build confidence, build their self-esteem, create real opportunities within the local authority. Let's just hope that you know, COVID will soon disappear and we can return back to some normality. I know that part of this came about because we had a significant number of volunteers in schools do amazing work supporting our children and young people with reading and other things. So I think it's really, really important that we support, recognise and value and provide a structure around volunteers, because I'm a real believer, someone who's volunteered for a long, long time, the value added that they can bring. And it wasn't my intention to raise any issues. It was just about, you know, making sure that all of the things around support for volunteers around, and just pick up the leader's point. I know the policy references disability confident. I'm not so confident that we've nailed all of those things like we would in an application form for a member of staff around disability and support needs. I would really welcome the head of HR going away and exploring that. So we understand the needs that people have got. We've got a duty as well, don't forget, under the Equality Act 2010 to ensure that. So if the head of HR, but this is amazing good practice, I'd like to commend Bev for the excellent work and the consultation done with Voluntary Action Merthyr Tydfil to ensure we've got a good practice volunteering policy to support the residents of the County Borough. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any other comments? No one is indicating, so over to Caris then, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could I please ask everybody who wishes to abstain, please show now. Thank you. All those voting against, please show now. Thank you. All those in favour, please show now. Thank you, Mr Mayor. That's carried.
Okay, thank you. If you could lower your hands, please. Councillor Midden, your hand is still showing as being raised.
I've just lowered it. It's pausing for some reason, Mr Mayor. I do apologise, but I had lowered it, but it's taken a little pause.
Yeah, no problem. It's gone down now. So agenda item number 10, Cavatha Heritage Area Special Purpose Vehicle. And I understand this is Councillor Geraint Thomas, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I won't dwell over the report. The report is here today to set, for the last few steps that the council's made and the Cavatha Foundation's made, and our next stages going forward. You'll see in the report that Welsh Government awarded the foundation £1.2 million in revenue funding. 13 trustees have been appointed, and we had a great meeting at Cavatha. We've had a good tour of the castle and the furnaces. And the next real steps now is for the asset team to decide what assets will be placed within the foundation. So if I go straight to the recommendation, Mr Mayor, in 2.1, that the content of the report be noted and approved. I so move, Chair.
Thank you. A seconder, please.
Yes, I'm happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question's on page 298 and 5.4, which refers to condition surveys in Pandy Farm and his engine house and Joseph Parry's cottage. And it goes on to say, a condition survey will be undertaken on the castle in autumn 2021. My question is, we're in the last few weeks of the autumn. Has the survey been undertaken in this very large, mostly empty building?
Do you want me to reply to that, Al? Yeah.
Yeah, go on, Chris, and I'll
Okay.
come in there.
The brief, as you alluded to, Councillor Jones, very large building requires a detailed specification to make sure we get the components of the structure assessment absolutely right, which we now have. So that's been circulated on South Wales, and we currently undergoing an assessment of companies' suitability to carry out that survey. So that's going to take a couple of months. Long overdue, we know, but again, it's a work stream that's really key, really, to the sustainability of the castle moving forward. And I don't think we've, for a while, carried out an intrusive survey like we have, which is much needed.
Yeah, if I can just come in that the structural complexity of this building is quite immense, and obviously as we look more from a structural survey perspective into it, it is very complicated. So it has taken us longer than we anticipated, and the amount of specialists firms who can carry out this type of work on our only Grade 1 listed building is quite limited, but we are almost there, Councillor Jones.
So if I can ask a supplementary question, you said a few months, Chris. Do you know exactly when this is likely to be undertaken? And I'll say why in my comments later on.
Yeah, so that's early next year, Councillor Jones.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Brent Carter, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Very quick question. I know the trustees have been appointed, which is great as a step forward, but can somebody, I don't want to know who the names are tonight, but can somebody tell us when will we be furbished with the names of who are actually going to be, who actually are the trustees, please?
So I'm happy to circulate the list as a follow-up, Councillor Carter, to this meeting.
That'd be great. Thanks, Chris. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, can I just add to that, Councillor Carter, that there is a short bio as well that we now have with each of the new trustees.
Oh, that'd be great. Thanks both. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chris Davis, your hand was raised, but it was gone down. Did you have a question?
Great minds think alike, and Councillor Carter beat me to the question, and the supplementary I was going to ask was responded to by the Deputy Chief Exec. So I welcome seeing the list of the renowned trustees and the biographies, because I understand from Councillor Mitten and Councillor Thomas that we've got some superb people with a range of skills that's going to absolutely drive forward the Cyfarthfa Foundation and the exciting projects for the Castle Furnaces et al. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, obviously we were very impressed as officers at the calibre of trustees who were appointed and who applied. They weren't approached; they actually applied by open advert, and it was a national advert, as in British National.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carter, did you have another question? Your hand is still raised.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I will remove it immediately.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much. So if there are no further questions, no one is indicating, we'll move on to comments then, please. Councillor Bill Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I read his report on, since we had the last consultation with the members, time factors have changed, the timescales have changed. Now, I've read this and we have no information, consultation or engagement with the public, because I down the park every day, doing a little bit of exercise, and everybody's asking what's happening with the park, because the Plus Park hasn't been open right through the summer. I know the COVID's been about, but people are asking questions. The park in general, they're asking questions what's happening. So all the new timescales and everything we're doing, can we get a newsletter out for the people to know? I know Lisa's pulling wind by there, but at the end of the day, everybody knows, right? All what's happening in the park, because it's in the Merthyr Express. Now everything's changing, timescales. And don't forget now, this castle will be up and going for the last 10, 15 years. It's another 3-4 years on top of it. So can we a newsletter out? Is tell the public what's happening, because they want to know.
Okay, I think that was a comment rather than a question, Councillor Smith.
No, I thought it said comments, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so that was a comment. Well, you should have been a comment, but can we take that on board, please, and consider that as? And then Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First and foremost, on page 297 under 4.3, it states a further board member that will represent a community organisation based within Merthyr is yet to be made. I welcome the fact that apart from the two councillors from our council are there, that there will be another local person from a community organisation on that Cyfarthfa Foundation. I think it's important. I then go to the question I asked on 5.4 about the condition survey in the castle. This, I think, is very important. I know this building, like several other people, extremely well. Many decades ago, I was a student there for several years, and I was a school governor when it was a school. So I've been in that building many, many times. It's been empty now. I know there's various work has been placed there and carried out to maintain it, but nevertheless, it is, apart from the museum, it is completely empty. And I honestly think that this survey, which will be extremely important, needs to be undertaken, Mr. Mayor, as soon as you're able to do it. Because then, if we have a detailed survey, the Kawartha Foundation will know the huge task that's going to be in front of them. But it's been empty since the school left it some years ago, and that survey needs to be done ASAP. And the other comment I wish to make is underneath that 5.5. It says the group has identified it will take approximately 18 months to 2 years to deal with the transfer of assets. Yet if you look at 5.7 lower down, it says in principle, Merthyr Tydfil Leisure Trust agreed to the assets being transferred. I do not understand why it's going to take in the region of 2 years to determine the transfer of assets. I'm sure there's been discussions taking place between the council and the trust, but for this to be delayed by another 2 years, I honestly, I shudder to think where we will be in 2 years' time if it takes that length of time. I know there's been issues in the past with our friends in the legal profession and both sides being involved, but I was put to understand that those issues that we had have now, not as bad. So can somebody tell me exactly why, or what are the reasons why it's going to take 2 years?
I'm sure Councillor Clive Jones can see me shaking my head because no, we're not in questions now, we're in comments.
Oh, fair enough. Well, that's my view. I think it doesn't need to take 2 years, frankly.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Lisa Mitten, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just observation, I just wanted to reiterate the point that about the 13 members, absolutely fantastic additional members. I'm looking forward to my colleagues receiving the information on those because they really are experts in their field. And, you know, where we talk about the buildings and the infrastructure, etc., you know, they certainly will have their eye on the ball in regards to that, using their expertise. And I just wanted to reassure Councillor Bill Smith, several times this evening, you'll see me huff and puff, and forgive me, Councillor Smith, I know you won't believe it, but as a lady of a certain age, sitting in a hot room for 2.5 hours, I'm feeling really hot and bothered. So it was no reflection on you and your comments, I promise you, and I did pop that into chat earlier on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, Lisa's looking at 22, no problem. So somebody give me an answer to the comments, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can answer.
No, we're in
comments
comments now. We're not in questions, I'm afraid. So
No, I'm sorry, I made a comment because the Mayor said it was for comments, and that's why I made the comment about the engagement and the consultation. I wouldn't have butted in otherwise.
Yeah, but you asked the question about the newsletter.
That was a part of the comment.
Yeah, but it was a question.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the members send their questions to officers to get a response.
Yeah. Yes, I did say, could somebody get back to Councillor Smith on that? So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is that okay, Councillor Smith?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody else like to comment before Councillor Geraint Thomas finishes? No, so back over to Geraint Thomas then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. just, you know, to reassure all members, really, you know, the Cyfarthfa Castle and the furnaces are of equal importance, Pontycafn Bridge as well. And we've just got to make sure these surveys are spot on and correct, so we don't miss something and one of these buildings falls down around us. So we've got to be spot on with that. And I know that the officers and the engineers at the council are really looking into the best practice to make sure this is done correctly. And I can assure you, we will get news out to everybody in the local authority and wider on the works that are going on. We will do that. And as Alan alluded to, when we went out for the membership of the trustees, it was international. We actually interviewed people from America to come on board as well. But we chose 13 people that were based in Britain. And when you see the bios on them, they are top of their field, you know, top of their fields, worldwide top of their fields. So, yeah, thank you very much. And I hope you support the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Karis, would you like to take a vote on that then, please?
Yes, can I ask all those members who seek to abstain, please can you show now? Thank you. Can I ask all those who are voting against? Before I start, Councillor Clive Jones, you have your hand up. Are you voting early? Are you voting on the last offer that I made?
Can I say, Caris, I think we've all had difficulties tonight. For some reason, there's a glitch in the system, and I've never come across this before, ever since we've had these laptops. So, you know, I clearly didn't want to vote against, but, you know, you just go to anywhere near the icon there, and it's all over the place.
Okay. I agree, yes, there's definitely been something that's been happening this evening, but I'm hopeful that we haven't had any problem with what we've actually ended up voting for. But I'll still offer the opportunity for anybody who wishes to vote against, please show now. Thank you. And all those voting in favour, please show now. There, and that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. If we could lower our hands then, please. If they lower, or understanding we've got problems. Item 11, and other business to deal with any other urgent business or correspondence. There is none. Item 12, to receive communications from His Worship the Mayor. There are none. We're now moving to item 13, closed session. In order for the following to be considered in private, it is suggested that the public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined under Part 4 of Schedule 12A of Section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972. Would someone like to move that, please?
Yes, can I move Section 100, please, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Would someone like to second that, please?
I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to take a vote on that, Karis?
Yes, you do. So again, I'll just very quickly ask anybody seeking to abstain, please show now. Anybody voting against, please show now. Anybody voting in favour, please show now. And that's carried, Mr. Mayor. And can I therefore just ask you to pause for a moment whilst Democratic Service